readers and voters generally. So our process is this conversation. We'd like you guys to talk to each other. If you disagree, and we're going to want to find out where you disagree, feel free to engage, rebut, compliment, criticize, demonize your opponent. And all of those are legal. We don't guarantee equal time, and if we've heard enough, not because we're rude, we got a lot of ground to cover, we may just move you along. We'll have a couple of questions that are sort of that we ask every candidate at the end, but we'll begin by asking you both to give us a brief bio, where you came from, what you've done for a living, political experience. Obviously, we know Representative, you're in office currently, and we'll have some questions about issues and different things. And why don't you go first, and since this is a new district, newly drawn district, if you describe the geography of the district, the number of the district, because not everybody's going to know that, and your partisan affiliation, that would be great.
Okay. So Steve Bates and I are here on behalf of the contest for Senate District 26. Senate District 26 now encompasses East Clackamas County from Canby out Beaver Creek area, up Estacada, includes Sandy, Boring, then into East Multnomah County, up to Corbett, into Gresham, all of Hood River County, and then just Mosier and the Dalles out of Wasco County. 140,000 people in just a little over 3,000 square miles.
So did it used to have that part of Wasco County, or is that new?
So Wasco County's new, and then the other trade was the Canby area for Happy Valley. It's kind of, it used to push north into East Gresham, and now it pushes south.
So did that improve the Republican advantage a little bit in the district?
Yeah.
Well, from my calculations and checking the current voter rolls, it's a net zero.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's 200 more Democrats in the district than there are Republicans, which I consider a net zero.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go with voting habits, though, when you take into account the non-affiliated voters, when you start to model people beyond just partisan affiliation, it's a significant improvement for a Republican.
Okay. So tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Tigard. I was born in California, born in Novato. My dad worked for HUD. He was transferred to Portland when I was a year old. So Tigard's been home my whole life that I can remember. Graduated from Tigard High in '95. Went to Linfield College, studied business at Linfield, and that's where I met my wife. Been together now for 26 years, married for 24. Have 2 kids, both down in Phoenix for school. My daughter's in studying her master's in child psychology, and then my son's a junior at Grand Canyon University. And then my wife and I own a small business. My wife no longer works the small business with me, but we own a small stove and spa shop in the Dalles. Have 7 employees and have been doing that now for 15 years. Before that, I worked for Evergreen International Aviation, and that's kind of where I got the bug to do this work. And started.
What did you do for Evergreen?
So I was the director of sales and marketing, but I got involved with contracts, and we had military work and postal service work. So I was back and forth to DC, advocating, lobbying, fighting, and some legal matters as well.
Sure.
And so in the litigation with the Postal Service is really where we started to engage Congress and try to get people to advocate for us to have the right audience with the right people to try and resolve the issue without going forward.
But you were never a pilot?
No, I was never a pilot.
Okay.
No, and we had 8,000 acres of farmland either. I was never a farmer, but got exposed to a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, interesting company. So you said, I think we've spoken about this, you have a stove and spa shop.
Correct.
So the stove business could be imperiled by all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. So I've my government relations work that I did at Evergreen kind of spurred an interest, but also then carried over and translated into us owning the small business. We have advocated to continue to burn wood stoves, modern, more efficient wood stoves than yesteryear's wood stoves that did pollute significantly. And then the gas fireplace industry was under attack for a while. The screen that is a safety screen was added, some other things like that to keep the industry viable. But still, relatively under attack from people that don't want to burn fossil fuels anymore.
Yeah.
And so,
How'd you get from Tigard to the Gorge? And I forget, you're from the Dalles, right?
I live in the Dalles now, yeah. So I went to Linfield, met my wife, and we were living in Dayton, Oregon for a few years. And one day we were driving home from church, and my wife said, "I am done with the mold and the mildew and the clouds and the rain and the depression I go through every winter when I don't see the sun." And I said, "What does that mean? Does that mean Arizona? Does it mean Southern California? Where are we going?" She said, "No, just to the other side of the Cascades." And so she said, "The Dalles, we get 300 days of sunshine."
Yeah.
And so we went to the Dalles and we bought the small business. I always thought small business for me would be a multi-million-dollar aviation service company, and my wife thought it would be a stove and spot shop. And it's been tremendous.
So far, we've learned of 2 important decisions that have been made, and your wife has made both of them. They sound like they were the right decisions.
And she's wonderful. I honestly, like that's the best decision I've made in my life, is my life partner. So.
Yeah. So you've been in the House how many terms?
So I was appointed in November of 18, and then I
replaced Huffman?
Huffman.
Yeah.
Yep. And then won election in 18 and 20.
Okay. And now you're going to replace the pear farmer.
Would you like to? I'd like to.
Your opponent's going to say something about that.
Yeah, no, and he should. But I'll say this, when I first went through the appointment process, I really do believe in a citizen legislature. I don't intend to do this forever. I committed to a room full of people without even knowing what I was talking about. I said, I'll do this for 10 years. Not realizing that meant multiple elections and redistricting process and all this that could take place in between then. But I still think that that's a good time to spend, to come in, have enough experience to learn, to do the job, and then be effective, and then get out of the way for someone else to go try.
Yeah, great.
Is this, before we switch, is this your first time coming in here for an endorsement?
It is, yeah.
Previously, you've held seats that are outside of our readership area.
Correct.
But this one, because it's Senate, extends down into our readership area.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out why I couldn't place you. That's why I can't place you.
Steve?
I was born in Jackson, Michigan. 6 months after I was born, my folks picked up everything and moved to California, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in Norwalk, went to private school for kindergarten through elementary, through 6th grade, and then junior high school I went to public school. Then started high school in Whittier, California. Then my dad's place of work in Watts, LA burnt down in 1968, so we moved to Barstow, California, where the company had another plant for him to manage. So I ended up spending the last 3 years of high school in Barstow.
It's near Nevada, right, isn't it?
Beg your pardon?
It's out in the desert near Nevada?
It's halfway between Los Angeles and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And at the tail end of my high school career, I started working in a restaurant, Steak Eater's Restaurant. I became a manager there, and then one of my high school friends had a brother that owned a gas station, and so they actually hired me away from the restaurant to help them run their gas station. And I graduated from high school, and 3 months later I was a Shell oil dealer down in Southern California, in Laverne, California. So I was the youngest Shell dealer in history for the Shell Oil Company then and now. And after that, well, I actually became a member of the Rotary Club, and I was the youngest Rotary member in the world at the time as well. So that business, I stayed with that business for a year, got married in 1972, found a couple of jobs, but then I hooked up with Curtis Industries out of Eastlake, Ohio. Within 3 months, they put me into management. I worked up to the district manager level. They transferred us up to Portland area to be closer to, so my wife could be closer to her folks who lived in Burns. She grew up in Burns. And then that company and I parted ways in 1977, went to work for another company which was headquartered again in Ohio, Premier Industrial Corporation. I worked for their Western Fire Equipment Division. And within 3 years, I formed my own company, Oregon Fire and Police Equipment. Well, we call it Oregon Fire Equipment then, but we added police equipment in the 90s. And that's basically how I made my living for several years. From 1978 is when we actually formed Oregon Fire Equipment Company. To the present.
What did you sell?
We sold fire equipment to fire departments all over the western United States.
You talking about turnouts, or are you talking
Yes,
about
turnouts,
ladders, or?
SCBAs, fire trucks. 25. The last 25 years of my career was actually I specialized in selling fire trucks. My biggest customers were in Alaska.
What's the name of the company that makes the $1 million fire trucks?
Well, there's several of them. The one I worked with was KME out of Nesquehoning, Pennsylvania. But the one you might be thinking of is Pierce, which is the most common name here in Oregon now.
Yeah. So you're essentially a manufacturer's rep, or?
Yeah, our company was a manufacturer's rep. We worked on a commission basis. We didn't actually, buy and sell the trucks, because that involved a lot of money, and the companies that build fire trucks are sort of interested in making sure that the person who sells the fire truck doesn't run off with the money.
Yeah, that makes sense. So have you run for office before?
Yes. Well, I ran for Clackamas County Commission in 2014 and 2016. I ran for Clackamas County Fire District Number 1 Board in 2017. And then in 2021, when Senator Alan Olson retired, I was the number 1 nominee to take his place, but unfortunately my friends on the Clackamas County Commission appointed somebody else. And it was Alan Olson that suggested that I run for this open seat.
Okay. And why do you want to serve in the legislature?
Well, I've actually been involved with the legislature over the last 10 years. I was the chair of the Boring Community Planning Organization. We did a fair amount of work with the state legislature involving land use issues. I actually introduced 19 different pieces of legislation through various legislators and committees.
Did they have a common theme?
Some of them were for veterans, and some of them were for Boring and Clackamas County land use issues. So I was split between the two. I got involved with the veterans in 2015. They came to me after they had seen me do some things in Boring and get some things accomplished. They needed help with some of their projects, so the Vietnam Veterans of America actually appointed me to be the chair of their Committee on Memorials and Remembrance. Mm-hmm. And I've been active with them since 2015.
Are you a vet?
No, sir, I'm not. The Vietnam War was the war of my generation. 58,479 fellows went to Vietnam and gave up their American dream so I could live mine. So I'm sort of giving back to all who served.
Got it. Okay. So, Representative, you've been in Salem in the minority for your entire career.
Mm-hmm.
What's an example of something that when you're trying to convince constituents to elevate you to the Senate, that you would say, we were in the minority, is there such a thing as a super minority? But I was able to get X done that was a heavy lift. What's an example of something that you would point to?
Yeah, I think my very first bill that I passed was a bill to fund good neighbor authority projects. We've been trying to get Oregon back into some form of timber harvest, and that was an investment. It came together as a 59-1 vote. Paul Colby held out on us, but it was a lot of work to get to the point where we convinced 60 people in the House that it was a good idea. And even Representative Holby said it was a good idea. He just didn't like the funding mechanism. He didn't like that we were using general fund
Tell us a
dollars.
little bit more about what the bill actually did.
So the Good Neighbor Authority is an agreement with the federal government that allows the state of Oregon to harvest and do culvert and other forestry restoration work on federal forest lands, which, in the long run, states like Idaho, Minnesota, and some others have made those self-sustaining, so they don't require further investment. You use the proceeds from the timber sale to reinvest in the next project, to go through a NEPA certification project, to get a timber sale back on the record, and can perpetuate a program like this.
So it's simply a harvest program. I mean, and nothing simple, but it's a program that would allow
That was my focus with it,
Yeah.
in fairness.
Yeah.
But there are other fish and wildlife things that can be done through that same program.
Why couldn't you, I mean, I know that the federal harvest,
Yeah.
has been really held up since the Clinton era.
Right.
So what were you able to undo or to do?
So with the Good Neighbor Authority, it's additive programs. So there are timber harvests that come through a process, but the initial investment and the additional investment allowed them to go after more, essentially, is what it was. I would say that's one.
Okay.
The biggest one, though, probably was my first ever bill, and quite frankly, I didn't know what I was doing. I drafted a bill that was supposed to protect the ability of a teacher to move from district to district when they had been accused of bad behavior, specifically sexual behavior with a student, whether it be harassment or physical sexual behavior, that there had been an accusation, there had been an investigation, and what was happening from many people's stories that I was able to hear from both parents and students and other faculty members that said this happened within our school district, was that teacher would be accused of the sexual impropriety, they'd be under investigation, and before the investigation would come to resolution, when it looked like the teacher would be found guilty, a separation agreement would be made with the school board, and it would be tied to a gag order.
Yeah.
So the teacher could move down,
Right.
we'll just use an example, from the Dalles to Hood River,
Right.
separate school district, different people,
Yeah.
reapply and be hired, and no record of that transgression existed. And so I drafted a bill. It was not well drafted. OEA came and met with me and said, "What in the HELL hockey sticks are you doing here? We don't know anything about this. You're surprising us with this. Lesson learned, don't surprise people with bill concepts that they're not aware of. Let people know what you're thinking, build a coalition." But ultimately, the bill died. I got a hearing. Margaret Doherty gave me a hearing. We had a chance to visit about it, but it died. And yet what it did was it spurred a conversation with Arnie Roeblen. And so Senator Roeblen gathered his team, his coalition of people that were advocates of good education policy, and they were moving on to the Student Success Act at the time. And so Rob Wagner was coming in as the Senate Education Committee Chair. And so the two of them joined with me in a work group. I put together the work group. I didn't know what I was doing there either, but I brought these two seasoned veterans from both an advocacy and a policy standpoint that came into the room and really helped bring the right people to the table. And ultimately we were able to pass in the following session Senate Bill 155 that put some teeth into ensuring that if a investigation was opened, it would be closed before it would be, essentially there's no chance for it to be outright dismissed, and there's no opportunity for a gag order. The investigation has to conclude. And so no matter what, there's a record of what's happening. So the new hiring body can look back and have complete transparency of what has happened.
What, did IAA oppose the bill in its new form?
Ultimately, we got them to neutral, and the arguments that we helped articulate to them that I think they bought into was, there are some bad seeds that could be weeded out, and it's better to have a coalition of quality teachers that share values than it is to have people that are engaging in bad behavior.
I remember the concept. I don't remember if there were a lot of no votes.
I don't believe there were any.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Steve, same question for you. I guess an example of something that you've done that you would point to as as evidence of your ability to do hard things and to do things that maybe people didn't want you to do and you convinced them to help you do.
Well, in boring, I led the charge to remove boring from the TriMet district. We found out, of course, I lived there and I paid taxes at TriMet for a lot of years, and I was always asking, well, I was doing a lot of traveling. My job took me all over the country, so I really wasn't aware of what was going on there in boring. Damascus got out of TriMet in 1988, but we were still in TriMet. So when my 40-year business career was coming to a close, I started sort of going to some local meetings and asking questions about why is TriMet still charging us, and I can't see any TriMet buses out here. We got one bus at 6 o'clock in the morning and one bus at 6 o'clock at night, and that's all we got. Everybody was paying full price. We were getting minimal service. So we started asking questions. TriMet came in. We had a series of meetings with them. They finally admitted that they were attempting to give an urban service to a rural community, and it doesn't work. They even admitted that their buses couldn't go on our rural roads. So as a result, we filed a petition. The TriMet hierarchy actually fought us. They had a hearing. They appointed the judge who held the hearing. We didn't get a say on who was going to hold the hearing. And he found against us. And then our next was appeal to the board of directors. And that was a 3-month process of going to the board meetings and explaining to them that we needed it to be let go. Businesses were not getting a benefit for the taxes they were paying. In addition, we actually uncovered some possible fraud of they were home care facilities that were collecting money that was given to them by the state for transportation so they could transport their clients to wherever they needed to go. But they were paying TriMet $2 a trip rather than using that state money that was given to them for transportation.
So then employers were able to no longer pay the TriMet payroll tax?
Correct. Effective January 1st of 2013, boring was taken out of the TriMet district, and it saves $750,000 a year in taxes for our boring businesses, which includes nurseries, the local gas stations, grocery stores. Everybody was pretty proud of that, and that was an undertaking that took a year and a half.
Okay. Great. So your opponent has been in Salem for the last 2 and change sessions. He knows how the place works. You haven't been there. Why would you be a better...
Well, I know how the place works.
Okay. Yeah, you've been there, but he's been there as a member. Why would you be a better choice for voters in Senate District 26 than Representative Bono?
Because I'm not an insider. I do have some issues that I want to address that he's had the opportunity to talk about, but they haven't. One of them is traffic congestion. In Clackamas County in particular, nobody's fixing the problem. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse. The problem isn't so much up in Hood River or the Dalles, but in Clackamas County, especially East County, Highway 212 to 226 is taking longer to get from 205 to Highway 26. Sometimes you can actually lose 10 minutes of your day going through Damascus. Excuse me.
Okay, so why would you be more effective at addressing that?
Because I know the issue, and I know that I've done all the research. We actually have ODOT actually declared Highway 212, 224 as a failed highway, but they've done nothing to correct that failed highway. What they did was they actually built a bypass that dumps into Highway 212 and 224 at 122nd. And that puts more pressure on that failed highway. And of course, they haven't widened the roads out to Damascus or Boring. As a result, there's a gridlock out there.
Okay. Representative, why would you be a better state senator than your opponent?
I think at the end, what I've found in the 4.5 years of doing this is it is as much about relationship building inside the building. I've learned to run with both a sprinter shoe and a marathon shoe at the same time. You know, it sounds odd, but like you really do need to be able to get around the building as fast as you can. You also need to be in it for the long haul. And so I think understanding the process, understanding the coalition building that has to be done. Like I in fairness, everybody's going to have a learning curve. Mm-hmm. You know, I told you my first bill concept, one I did pass, the other one was the terrible concept. Like it wasn't well thought out, it wasn't well drafted. I didn't have any coalition. I didn't have a work group, and I just threw my idea at the wall, and I quickly watched it just die a slow death.
Well, and I already have a coalition going in. I've just last year, 2021, we passed Senate Bill 319. It was a bipartisan bill. But
what it did, I don't remember.
It created the Vietnam War Memorial on the Oregon State Capitol grounds. That was our third try. If it hadn't been for the fact that there were 2 walkouts the previous 2 years, we probably would have had it done sooner. But the first year, it actually died in committee. It got sent to Ways and Means, which it shouldn't have. But unfortunately, that was part of the learning curve. I already know how to move a bill. I've moved several, so.
Okay, want to let you continue your answer?
Yeah, well, and to that point though, I do think that there are bill concepts that are not popular that we're trying to move as well. There was a bill concept that we just passed for veterans, since you mentioned veterans. We are now the first state in the nation that provides dental coverage to veterans that earn between 167 and 400% of median income. Those below 167 are covered by the state, but previously everyone else didn't have the ability to have.
Those are general fund dollars?
Those are general fund dollars, yeah.
What's the fiscal on?
It was $5 million.
Wow.
And it will be something that we'll have to revisit, we'll have to study. That was like pulling teeth, in fairness.
You beat me to it. I was like, no excited, no pun intended there.
You know, Cedric Hayden worked with me on that bill,
Yeah.
and it was an absolute heavy lift. It was his bill. In fairness, I said he helped me. I helped him pass his bill. It was his concept that I signed on to and helped navigate that through the building. But it was not popular. We had pushback from the Veterans Department here in Oregon. We had pushback from medical providers. We had pushback from co-chairs, Ways and Means, saying, can we afford this? And we said it's important, it needs to get done. This coverage is essential for people to have a healthy mouth. And so that's one. And if we get to go back, if I'm fortunate enough to win this race and go back, I want to fix some things that are like detrimental to people today. I've talked to so many retiring folks that are on fixed income that are facing inflation right now. Like, I'm out knocking doors, I'm talking to people, and I'm hearing about the cost of living, like constantly cost of living. We had a bill, and again, there were a coalition of 5 of us that put together kind of an affordability package. And one of the bills that really was super popular with voting public that we didn't get traction in the building, that I think we can bring back and re-educate, especially right now in today's time with inflation the way it is, but to freeze property taxes for those that are of retirement age. We've got people that were lifelong firefighters, police, whatever, that are on a pension.
For everybody.
For anyone over a given age to freeze property taxes, absolutely.
Have you talked to the AOC about that?
Would you means test that?
I think at 65 at a retirement age, we could put that out there and allow people that are truly living on a fixed income. We would have parameters, of course.
Yep. So you would means test.
You can't have people, that are wealthy beyond belief that could afford it. We're looking at the people that are truly living on a fixed income, where the tax burden today is beyond what their original mortgage was.
Okay.
The Senate Bill 500 that I worked on with Senator Alan Olson was a bill that would reduce property taxes for wounded warriors. There's already a provision in the Constitution, state statute, that gives a discount on property taxes. Actually, in 1911, it was 100% property tax forgiveness for anybody who was a wounded warrior. But through the years, back then, that was the way the state got their income, was through property taxes. So that was a state law passed that forgave individuals who were wounded warriors of their property taxes. But then as the counties started relying on property taxes, that sort of got reduced. And now there's less than a 10% reduction in property taxes for wounded warriors. If there's a firefighter who dies in the line of duty, his widow is forgiven all of her property taxes, but we can't forgive our wounded warriors who've lost a limb or lost the ability to work, a way of reducing their property taxes. We worked with Associated Oregon Counties. We actually had sort of a solution in place, but then Lane County came in, and Lane County started maneuvering, and that bill actually died in committee on the House side. So what he's talking about is something good to talk about, but I don't see it happening because the Association of Oregon Counties and some of the related organizations, such as the the county.
Special districts.
Well, special districts are concerned about income.
Everybody
Yeah.
gets property taxes kind of
Right.
right there. Steve, I want to ask you a question. In your voters pamphlet statement, you say that you are the founder and CEO of Oregon Fire and Police Equipment Company. And I looked that up, and I don't find that company exists.
Did you look at the Secretary of State's?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Our Oregon Secretary of State's name is Oregon Fire Equipment Company Limited.
Right.
Yeah.
I found that.
And we did a DBA for Oregon Fire and Police Equipment Company. It's the same company.
So when you filed to run for this office, you said founder and vice president, Oregon Fire Equipment Company Limited. That's your Secretary of State. That's your filing with the Secretary of State for this office.
Yeah.
And when I look in the Secretary of State's corporation lookup, there's no name. That company doesn't exist.
Oregon Fire Equipment Company Limited.
Fire and police. So where does
like I said,
where's the police come
That's
from?
it. Well, we sold police equipment.
But did that company ever exist?
Yes, it did.
Where?
I wished I had one of my business cards.
Well,
I give
no,
it to
I mean,
you.
did
Yeah.
it exist legally?
Yes.
Where?
In the state of Oregon. We had a DBA, a doing business as.
It doesn't show up in the business registry.
Under the business registry, you can have a corporation and then you actually can do a DBA.
Yeah, but the DBA should be listed with the corporations division.
It was, but apparently it's not now.
When was it there?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. You know that.
We're a small business now, mind you. I am semi-retired.
Yeah.
We only kept that business going
Yeah.
in order to satisfy the needs of some of our long-standing customers, like the City of Bend. They called us just today and ordered a bunch of badges. Oregon Fire and Police Equipment Company was a going concern until about 2012, and that's when we started reducing we were looking to retire.
Okay. I'm asking you, and I'm sure you know this, that it's a felony to put false information in the voter's pamphlet.
It's not. I've got a business card that says.
Well, no, but I mean,
Yeah.
a business card is not sufficient evidence that the company existed.
And I can go back home and get my records and find out
Okay.
when we let that go. We might have let that business name go. I don't know. Like I said, for the last 10 years, we have just been filing as the corporation in order to make sure that we met the rules.
Right,
of
and
the
I
law.
see that your filing is up to date for the fire company, but never for the police. And you know, I mean, let's face it, we're in an election year when people are really happy about the police. Right? They like police.
Yeah.
Police were out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They're in this year. Did you add that name to tell
No.
voters that you're a police guy?
No.
No.
We actually were the ones that introduced second chance bulletproof vests in the state of Oregon in the
Okay.
1990s.
Okay.
The
So
police.
that was a big part of your business. The
Yes,
police. Okay.
yes.
All right. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I'd like you both to just sort of tell us. I got two last questions for you. One question is sort of an independence question. You noted that the voter reg is very even in your district. So whoever wins this race is going to represent, a very balanced, unusual in Oregon district. So a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, and a lot of people who aren't registered with either party. So is there a place in which you, Steve, or you, Representative Bonham, would say, I am not just a party line Republican, nothing wrong with that, but show us some independence, an example of where you don't just say I'm a orthodox Republican.
I am a Republican.
Right, I know that.
And I'm open to conversations with anybody about any subject. I can actually sit and compromise if there is a reason to compromise, or if it will end up in a solution to a problem. But to actually say I'm going to abandon the Republican platform.
No, I don't mean that. So,
Yeah.
for instance, when Newt Bueller ran for governor in 2018, he said, "Look, I'm pro-choice." When Betsy Johnson is running now, she's very opposed to cap and trade, for instance. So she has been a Democrat, but is opposed to many parts of the Democratic platform.
Mhm.
I'm not asking you to
Yeah.
abandon your party. I'm just saying, is there a place where people would be surprised and they'd say, hey, Steve is a Republican, but he also thinks.
I am a conservative that's open to discussions. I'm not going to actually identify anything that somebody can come back and say, well, you said that, and when I really didn't mean it. I look at the Republican platform, and that is what I'm running on as a Republican. But if there's something that comes up down the road, I don't know what it could be.
Sure.
I'm open to discussion.
Okay. Representative?
Yeah, I think my approach has been conscience, constituents, caucus, in that order. Like I think there's some things that I just personally could not vote for. I have convictions and moral values and characters that there's no way I could. But
Is there, so in both parties,
Yeah.
they whip their members pretty hard, and
Yeah.
they want them to lock up on every vote.
I was deputy leader for 2 years.
Okay, so has there been a vote that you've taken where your caucus leader said, we really need you on this one, and you said, I can't be with you?
So what's interesting, that didn't exist within our framework. So when Christine Drazen was leader and I was deputy leader,
Yeah.
I can't tell you a single moment where we ever went to the caucus and said, you need to vote this way.
Okay, no more Wayne Scott.
We didn't ask them. I mean,
Yeah.
we know that existed on the other side. We've heard from our Democrat
Yeah,
colleagues
sure.
that absolutely Tina came in and broke arms and said, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
We certainly lobbied and petitioned at
Yeah.
times for
Yeah.
a certain position that we thought could restore balance in a political environment,
Yeah.
right? Like, because not only do you lead inside the building, but we were in charge of recruiting candidates, fundraising, and running, and ultimately won 2 Republican seats back for the first time in 10 years, running elections on behalf of Republicans. So, absolutely, there's a partisan bent to what we do.
Sure.
But when it came time to vote, for people to cast their vote, I think we all respected the fact that. And I'm going to say 70,000 because that's the new number of the amount of people a district represents. But individuals have different concerns for their constituencies,
Sure.
absolutely. And so I think we've respected that above all else in the caucus.
Did you ever take a vote when you're...
Me personally, like off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of one right now. I think paid family and medical leave was a different topic, difficult topic to come to a conclusion on. That was very political process, but at the end of the day, I think my constituents said that they thought that was a valuable thing, and I ultimately came
So you
full circle
voted-
and I did vote for
So
that.
you did vote for it, so
Yeah.
that would be an example. Okay. So for all of us, the last 2 years have been hard, and at some point, some of us have said, gee, it feels like COVID's over. For Aaron, he's a big Blazer fan. He finally got to go to a game in person, and that was a big deal. If you remember the previous season, there were no fans, and at the beginning of this season, there weren't many.
Right.
Yeah, my daughter actually got to sing the national anthem for one of the games where nobody was there.
Well, so that long lead up is a question that we're asking everybody in this cycle, everybody for every race. Was there a moment of joy for you, or a moment where you said, "Oh, I can get on a plane and go see a relative, or I can go to a Blazers game or a restaurant"? Or when did the feeling that the pandemic was kind of sort of over come to you, if it's come to you?
I had, not that you're asking me, but I had another one today, actually.
Oh yeah,
For the first time since the pandemic began, I went to Stepping Stone Cafe and sat at the counter.
There you go.
Mhm.
So.
That felt like a return to normal in a way that I couldn't quite put a finger on. But it was like, wow, I did not think I'd be doing this again anytime soon.
So, Representative Bonham, return to normal moment for you, if there has been one?
I'll struggle with this one. I didn't ever really modify my life that much. We had a serious health concern within my family, and so that dictated some of our decisions. But a lot of my life is away from people. In my personal life and in my business, I do a lot of work outside where I'm out building swimming pools or
Oh, so you
installing
do the
hot tubs.
installation yourself?
Yeah, I still physically work.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
glad that I was telling Steve before we walked in that my pants are very dirty because I came straight from
Okay.
a work site. But
Okay.
up here, I look
Yeah.
hopefully somewhat professional. But no, I was able to relatively live normally. The changes with like restaurants and takeout, but east of the Cascades, we we have a lot of space. We have a lot of built-in social distancing just from the sheer proximity of where we live. And so, getting back to seeing smiling faces, I think is probably the most endearing thing that's happened since the end of COVID is getting to see people's facial expressions again, getting to smile at people and not just trying to smile with our eyes, but actually showing our teeth and bringing hopefully joy and merriment to one another through a friendly smile.
Great. Okay.
And for me, that walking through the grocery store and actually smiling, being able to smile at kids and know that they get to see me smile, because kids are important to me, and that's the one thing that I guess I miss the most, is actually seeing the response of kids, because they couldn't see you smile. They couldn't actually experience the encounter, whether it be a silent encounter or one with speech.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you both for coming all this way. Really appreciate your time.
Well, and I want to say I'm very pleased to meet you. I've always respected your journalistic work. I really respect it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Aaron, by the way. I'm news editor.
Thanks for your time, Steve.
Thank you.
Steve, pleasure having you in here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.